Right. Okay. All right. Everyone, this is Thomas Lee, Dr. Thomas Lee. He wants to be called Tom, so we'll keep it informal. But Tom, could you give a brief background on yourself, kind of where you are currently, and then maybe how you got there?
Sure. Well, I'm getting a call from a patient. Hang on one second. Actually, I'll just skip. Let me see. Okay. Um, okay. So I am a internist and cardiologist. I live in Boston. I practice part time at Brigham and Women's Hospital. My major jobs are working for Press Ganey, which does surveying about patients, about their experience of care, and the doctors, nurses, and other folks in the workforce about how they feel about doing their job, with the ultimate goal of trying to make healthcare better. And I've been doing that for like 6.5 years now. Before that, I was like in management at the Brigham and Partners Healthcare, trying to make the network work and trying to make it better. Um, so I've done a lot of writing and a lot of editing over the years. When I was in college, I did worked on the newspaper, and so like writing stuff has always been part of my career. So it's sort of helped me differentiate myself, and began editing a lot. I worked at the New England Journal of Medicine as associate editor, and I edit this publication, a spinoff from the New England Journal called NEJM Catalyst. But my big goal is, I'm a child of immigrants, and like very idealistic parents, now deceased, but like they always said, try to make things better. So the real orientation has been, how can I make my contribution by making the healthcare system better? And and I actually think what this article is about is like, well, what's better mean? What's the goal? And what I'm hoping this discussion will be, the way I hope it'll be relevant to all of you younger folks is, how do you think about what it means to do a good job? And it's, all of us want to do more than just show up and stay out of trouble and get paid for what we do. I mean, those are basics. But the thing, what does it mean to do a great job? What does it mean to get better? And so I've been involved in doing things like developing quality measures, the HEDIS measures. And one thing, everyone who does something knows the limitations of what it is you're doing. Like physical therapists know the limits of what physical therapy can do. Surgeons know the limits of what surgery can do. And as someone who's like developed quality measures, I have a very realistic sense of the limits of what quality measures can do. There is no quality metric that is the right thing for every single patient. But how do you think about getting better when there is no gold standard for what better means? So that's what I'm hoping we'll be talking about today. I want to get better. So, and but it's a struggle to figure out what that means.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that intro. And I think we'll start with your editorial, zero pain is not the goal, and then we'll kind of see where that discussion goes. But can you provide kind of working definition of what you think the difference is between pain and suffering, so we're kind of on the same page?
Yeah, yeah. And that's an interesting question because one thing that a neurologist said to me when I was in training is all pain is in the head. Like if they chop your leg off or something, ultimately you're perceiving the pain in your cerebral cortex and so on. So psychic pain, physical pain, those things are all experienced, in your CNS. But there's to more, as you guys, probably all of you have parents, grandparents, probably, and you're aware that it's not, there's all sorts of other ways in which people suffer, and confusion, embarrassment, feeling like you haven't been respected, anxiety, some of these, there's suffering that's beyond our control, like someone's got cancer pain from bony mets, that we can only do so much about that. But And then there's, the uncertainty of what someone's prognosis is going to be. We can only do so much about that. But, I think, we all know that we cause unnecessary pain to patients because, when we just don't have our act together. And, or like we roll our eyes when they mention someone else that's taking care of them and they lose confidence, in that person. That kind of that's suffering. So there's avoidable and unavoidable suffering, and we have to sort of think, okay, what can we do for both? How can we mitigate the unavoidable suffering, and then how can we prevent the avoidable suffering that comes from dysfunction of the healthcare system?
Does anyone have any thoughts or questions from that?
Well, let me tell you about, because I think it'll amuse you, how I came to write this article, uh, which was, I had gone from working in my, job at the Brigham and Partners Healthcare, uh, to working at Press Ganey in 2013. After I never changed jobs, I just started my internship and stayed and tried to make my institution good, and I never looked for a job. But in 2013, the head of Press Ganey said, "Look, how'd you like to try to have impact on a national scale?" And he made it very attractive, and I said, "Okay." So I went there, and I started going around the country, and I found, there was a good chunk of doctors who hated Press Ganey, and they hated. And then when you talk to them, they hated being measured. They hated getting any feedback, and I felt confident that, the net effect of measurement was good, and I felt confident that I was at appropriate humility about the limitations of it. So I actually, even though like the stereotype is, for Chinese, like Chinese Americans like me, is that we don't like conflict, and I don't like conflict. But you know, when you don't like conflict, conflict resolution is actually something really exhilarating and fun. So I actually, somewhere in my 40s, figured out that I actually like sort of going into a room where everyone's mad and addressing it and working it out. It's and when you it doesn't always work out great, but it actually usually does when you're face to face. When you're face to face with people, they can't be a complete jerk like you can be on email. So I like going face to face and working it out. So I told, as I went around the country, I started telling people, look, if you got doctors who are really angry about stuff in general, and Press Ganey in particular, let me meet with them. So I went to a hospital in Pennsylvania, and a bunch of their ED docs were just, walking around in a rage all the time. And they hated being measured for their pain control. And so I said, well, let me meet with them. So I sat down in a room with like 6 or 8 of them. And, one of them was the most articulate and, uh, redhead, all wired up, angry. And he was the one who did most of the talking. And he goes, look, you know, we're being driven out of medicine today. There's so many pressures on us from so many angles. And he goes, and when people measure us on pain control, you're trying to tell us write prescriptions for narcotics to get people out of the emergency department so that they'll write down that their pain control levels are zero and their pain is zero. And you're making us prescribe narcotics, and you're making the world put financial incentives on us so that we lose money if we don't. And there are people retiring from their jobs early and quitting their jobs because they just can't take this environment which you're creating by measuring pain. And so then it was my turn to talk. And I said, well, yeah, I've got a long answer and a short answer to that. Which one do you want to hear? And the guy goes, well, try the short answer first. And I go, okay, here it is. That's bullshit and you know it. And he just started laughing, and the other guys started laughing too because they know it's bullshit. Like they know that there are lots of disaffected clinicians of all types, burnt out people and stuff. But like, is anyone quitting their job because they're being measured on something? If there are, they're really isolated cases. I said, I can't find one example around the country of a clinician who actually has a financial incentive directly related to obliterating their patient's pain. To and and he you know and he said, I actually feel that financial incentives should not be used for patient experience at all. uh, but I said that you're telling me the things that you just said, though. I understand why you're saying it. You're not happy. You're feeling stressed out, and in general, and the idea of being measured and the measure's implication that you're not perfect, it drives you nuts. And so we ended up parting company, very nicely. I criticized the hospital's way of paying them because I said that I don't think that they should have a financial incentive on their overall their individual patient experience things. The samples just aren't good enough, and there is no. And I said nothing should be 100%. And if you put money on something, it becomes a dichotomous outcome. You either get the money or you don't, and therefore, if you anything that keeps you from getting the money drives you crazy. So and plus, people in healthcare, they want to be perfect. So that's what it, that sort of that conversation. I mean, first I was very delighted that I could get away with saying that's complete bullshit and you know it, and they did know it, and I have found that if you've got clinical credibility from having worked with patients, as I still do, still practicing, and that's one of the advantages of having a leader who is a clinician, is you get to say stuff like that's bullshit and you know it, and other clinicians, they will say, okay, now let's get down to the substance. But the substance was, I try to get the article is that, there is no measure that is uh, the right thing to do for every patient. There's no measure any measure that is the right thing to do for any patient is so boring and useless because everyone's already doing it pretty much, except for people who are idiots. Um, but we have a zillion issues in medicine where it's not black and white, but there still is some value to nudging people and they're in a direction, and there still is some value for helping people understand, where on the bell-shaped curve they are, and that if you're an outlier in either direction, it's a reason to be concerned, that you might learn something. There's a wonderful book called The Wisdom of Crowds. It's not a healthcare book, but it's about how groups of people are smarter than individuals, and any individual can be. And there is this, it actually starts with a famous thing from like around 1900. Some British statistician went to a country fair and he asked 100 people to guess the weight of an ox. And the guesses were all over the map. But when they averaged the guesses, it was like 1 pound off from the actual weight of the ox. And the point of that was that in any guess, there is information plus error. And the error is, if the error is random and you get enough guesses, then the average is probably about right. So in terms of like, how do you approach a topic like pain, or how do you approach a topic like how often you go to surgery, for low back pain or something like that? Um, if there is no right or wrong answer to that. It's not 100%, it's not 0% for those kinds of things, but if you look at what are people in general doing, then and if you're an outlier one direction or the other, it should at least give you pause. It could be that the bell-shaped curves needs to move in one direction, but it's useful to know whether you're an outlier. So saying that zero pain, is not the goal, was, trying to say that, you know, there is no, there's no right or wrong, but there's still value to measurement. Obviously, working for a company that does measurement, uh, and gets paid for doing it, there was a self-serving aspect of it. And you can be sure that in Twitter, I got hammered by a zillion people for about a year after this article. I mean, it is like, the internet and Twitter have enabled, there's a fringe like group of clinicians who are just furious out there, and they hate CME, and they hate measurement, and they are like, the Proud Boys or something like that, and they were QAnon, and they just like, they have, apparently they do nothing but they get on Twitter and they hound people who write things that they don't that go against them. I wrote another thing that was in defense of CME, and I got, the same people were attacking me for like, a year or two for that. But basically that was the point that I wanted to make, and the response was interesting. I was just delighted when Chris emailed me saying that the article caught his interest, and we and you guys might want to talk about it.
Thank you so
Mm.
much for that epic background on why you wrote it. How do you, let's say you're working with a patient or with another coworker, and there's such a identity around reducing pain or getting pain down to to zero. How do you go about those conversations, maybe from a patient viewpoint where maybe it's not achievable, and from a clinician viewpoint where that's kind of their sole metric?
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course, it's never the sole metric for clinicians, and no one should ever feel like it's the sole metric. And I can tell you, that is one of the things that, like, I work with Michael Porter at Harvard Business School, and that's one of his points, which is that there is no single metric that tells the whole story for any condition. There's a hierarchy, and at the top, there's like death, and then there are clinical complications and patient-reported complications. It's the sort of things that, we can measure and that are directly related to the medical condition. And then the next layer, the next tier, he has three basic tiers: the sort of clinical outcomes. The next tier is the dysfunction of care delivery, like, how confused and anxious and afraid did they make you? And then third is the durability of the benefit, so that, a hip replacement the last 2 years is not like a hip replacement that lasts 10 years. So, ideally, systems should exist to capture all of those, and you should be looking at them all the time. So it's not something like, like with money, what you're after, which is as much as possible. If you're working in finance, that's simpler. But in healthcare, our work is more complex. And sometimes there are trade-offs, as you know. Sometimes you do things which improve quality of life but shorten overall life. And but you should at least know what you're doing, and it takes measurement of all of them. Now, all that said, I mean, I've got like a big intellectual and philosophical ways that sound nice for thinking about this stuff. But, I got my patients, like, I can go my briefcase there and pull out a long email I have about this one patient of mine with like terrible back pain that is just not getting better. And he's had physical therapy, and I mean, I'll tell you guys about it. Well, how many of you guys are in physical therapy, rehab type things? Okay, so it's a good chunk of you. All right, so my guy is he's like a 40-year-old Black male who actually works at our hospital and another hospital as an OR tech, and he is quite overweight. He's probably 280 pounds, like 5'8", and he's got a real bad back pain. And he's got some bulging discs, but like nothing that was like screaming out like he needs surgery. And he has, been in the ED a bunch. He's been out of work for a month. He just went back, and he only lasted a week. And he's, uh, I don't think he's faking it. And he's been doing physical therapy. We've given him one series of steroid injections, and now we're going to try some facet injections. And he's already saying he doesn't think that they're going to work. All right. So he is, a nightmare case, a nightmare. The one who's really having a nightmare is him. And so as first, we're we're doing what we can for him. We're trying the facet injections. We've done physical therapy. I just talked to him yesterday. I just had a virtual visit with him yesterday, and I went over again how cigarette smoking, which he is a smoker, that and weight loss, those are two things that are related to back pain, and he's got to really work on them. And and I felt guilty because I felt like he's telling me that he's got um, it's almost like I'm trying to blow him off by putting out something that, you know, is impossible for him to take on. Now, it is possible for him to stop smoking, and I don't think the evidence is that good for that. Weight loss would obviously be a great thing, but weight loss is tough. But I'm not sure that there's anything that we can do for him that's going to change the picture. I do believe his pain is real. And I did give him 15 Percocet yesterday, in part because he was on Motrin. We had him on Motrin, and his blood pressure went up to 190 on Motrin. All right, so this guy is hard, and every time I see emails or that he's on my schedule, I want to put my face in my hands. So I am living in the real world here. All right, so what am I trying? What do of course I shouldn't try to avoid him, even though the temptation to try to avoid him is very real. So what are my goals when I see him? Well, I can tell you the number one goal that I've had, aside from doing whatever I can clinically and not letting him get addicted to opioids, that kind of thing, is I want him to feel respected. I want him to feel like he has credibility and that we believe him, because I feel like that is a variable that's in play, and I can control. I can influence that one heavily. And I think that all of you know that minorities, and especially Blacks, they don't have trust for the healthcare system. They don't trust for getting COVID vaccination. Their rates are much lower. But one of the reasons they don't have trust is they don't feel like listened to. They don't feel respected. There's a little book back in my bookshelf called Epistemic Injustice, which is about who gets believed. And the person who wrote it was really writing mainly about women. Women don't get believed as much as men. And I think that almost every woman I know can describe being in groups saying, well, what about this? We could do this. We could do this. And everyone sort of goes, yeah, and then some guy says, well, what about doing this? Everyone goes, that's a great idea. So some of you are laughing because you've been there. But I think that the data show that as big as the gap is in terms of between males and females, in terms of who gets believed and who gets respected, the gap across races is much, much, much bigger. And it shows up in there's actually research by someone named at Hopkins, Mary Catherine Beach, wonderful woman, and she's like analyzed the language in charts, and that there are and had people who are blinded to the race of the patient, and the data just show that there's all this skepticism that's inserted into medical notes that suggests that people just don't believe blacks, don't believe other minorities, as much as they believe you know their own race, or and so on. So my what I when I get on the phone, you know Zoom yesterday with this guy, that was my goal. I wasn't going to make his back pain go away. I wasn't optimistic I could get him to stop smoking or lose weight. He actually does says he stopped smoking, but I want him to feel respected and believed. And I think I did okay. And it's not a one shot thing, it's a chronic thing. Chris,
Yes.
are you okay?
Dr.
Uh,
Lee, actually, can I just jump in here real quick?
yeah, sure.
I kind of had in kind of you sharing your experience with that and like how to handle that situation in that patient, and then kind of tying it back to that furious, redheaded, getting all red, flustered in the face. And I liked in your suffering paper, you mentioned, what contributes to suffering, and you have those three different, you've got disease, treatment, and then organization or dysfunction, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, have you, how do you think that changes? And I don't mean this in like a woe is me sort of way, but do you feel, have you looked into what you think contributes to the suffering on the side of the healthcare provider?
Of the providers as opposed to the patients.
Yes.
And I think that's a great question. And now, because the suffering of caregivers, it's a really big deal, and it's a really big deal at it's been an increasing big deal, because of the complexity of medicine has been going up because there's so much more we can do, but that means there are so many more people involved, and no one knows anyone. People are running around. There's more confusion, and so the rewards that one got when medicine was smaller, but we could do less. Some of the psychological rewards aren't there, and so it turns out that healthcare providers are busier than ever because there's so much more we can do, but we're also caught up in the confusion and the chaos, and there's more burnout. Now, COVID has put this burnout stuff on steroids. So that right now, I just came from a Zoom version of a meeting with a whole bunch of big delivery systems, and the number one issue is burnout in the workforce. People are scared, they're exhausted, they're stressed out, and we are talking about, and people get it. It's not just doctors, it's not just nurses, it's all types of therapists. The respiratory therapists are completely stressed out by the COVID ICU experiences, for reasons you can probably imagine. So it's a big problem. And I'm an optimistic guy. And actually, if you move into management leadership type things, you got to be optimistic, and you can't be, full of it, but you have to think there's a way things can get better. And there are two paths, two themes for how things can get better that I hope you'll find encouraging. Okay, the first thing is we actually have a lot of data showing that the things that patients value, caregivers value too. As I alluded to, we in this paper, we have a ton of data at Press Ganey showing that when you do multivariate analyses, the things that really matter to patients is they want good people who really care, who are working together, they're having teamwork, and they're communicating well. Those four factors are what matter most to them. And they actually statistically, and I think in real life, they overwhelm like waiting time. Like waiting time never comes in after you take into account those variables as a predictor. And it also they also are more important than pain control. And we've done a zillion analyses, and pain control as a variable never is important to patients, but it never is statistically significant. It's those other things which matter more. And once you take into account people they trust, who are working well together, who seem to care, and who are communicating, then that's what patients care about. Well, it turns out when you Press Ganey also measures how do people feel, caregivers feel about being at work. Some of you may even have done surveys, but all employees, not just clinical types like us, but also office staff and so on. And and there are differences among different groups, but they're basically it's the same things that matter. Teamwork is something that really matters to people. They want to feel that their organizations got the right values and the leaders are not full of crap and so on. But they teamwork has a huge influence on, if they feel their organization has good core, people are working well together, they're much less likely to leave. They are happier. They're more resilient and less likely to be burned out. And they actually like working with other people who seem to care. Now, the so it's not like a fight between patients' interest and clinicians' interest and who's going to win. It's actually there's an alignment. There's a sweet spot where the interests are the same, which is patients want good care and people want to feel like they're giving good care. So making care better and making teamwork better and stuff is, that's where the sweet spot is. I mean, naturally, the interests aren't always perfectly aligned, and not for every single patient, but by and large they are. I want to really emphasize the teamwork thing. Like what we have found is that when people are on great teams and they really know the people around them and they're working with the same group of people, regularly, they are happier and they have less burnout, and they're resilient. And the thing that I want to emphasize, Kevin, about resilience is that, like, there's going to be bad stuff, ridiculous stuff happening in all of our lives at work all the time. And the question is, are you going to like shrug it off and suck it up and deal with it? Or are you going to go nuts? And if you're working with people you really like and trust, and and you feel like you're doing good things, people are more likely to just like, oh, brother, and then they just deal with it. And we're in healthcare, we have patients and stuff. I mean, there's gonna be crazy stuff happening all the time. So having great teams is the number one thing. And I'll say one more thing about that, then I'll turn to the second thing. I visited, early on when I went to Press Ganey, I went to Northwestern, and they have this integrated pelvic disease center there. And it's virtually, virtually every patient's a woman with a range of issues like incontinence and, prolapse of, various organs and so on. And it's a one floor with in the middle is physical therapy, and then the various types of surgeons and urologists, gynecologists and stuff have offices around the outside. And so when they're walking around the hall, I was being taken around by this surgeon, and she saw physical therapists and said to the therapist, "Oh, you saw Mrs. So and so yesterday," and they talked about that patient for a little bit, and it was clear that they knew each other really well because they worked together every day. And I said that, geez, I taken care of a lot of patients, but like when I have patient with incontinence, I just write physical therapy and they go off to someone. I don't know who they're going to see. I don't know if it's going to be someone who has any interest in or expertise in physical therapy. They just go to physical therapy. And I said that I'm sure my patients can tell. I don't know. I'm just sort of sending them away and I'm praying that they don't come back. And the surgeon started laughing at me, and I said, I realized I didn't know the names of any physical therapists that I work with on a routine basis. I didn't know I'm going to send you to so and so because of such and such. Now this was a few years ago. I've changed that since then. Um, and this surgeon goes, that is a shame. And she said, first, the care's better. And she said, patients love it when you and the physical therapist come in together and you talk about it. And he says, and the great thing is, and she looked around, she goes like, they know all this stuff that we don't know. And it makes you look really good to go in there and they say stuff that you didn't really know and you nod along. And it's like you know what you're talking about because otherwise the patients can tell when you don't know stuff. So anyway, so having a real team where you're physically co-located and you know each other, that is so much better than what most people have, which is no one knows anyone. Now the other thing I wanted to throw out there for you, which might be useful, is in terms of like okay, everyone wants to live up to their own ideas of who they are. So how do can you use that in a constructive way? So one of my colleagues named Chrissy Daniels came up with these 4 questions, which might be useful for you guys as you go through your work, and they're good also for groups and teams. So the first question, and like like Kevin, you're a student, or you?
Yes. Yep. I'm a second-year student right now.
Okay. All right. So but you've had some patient care interactions and stuff, right? Okay. So I'll put you on the spot and here. Okay. Question number 1 is, what are you hoping patients say about you when they go home? So name 3 words that you would hope that pop to mind.
Sure. I'd say compassionate, proficient, and then honestly, it's kind of an ego thing, but I'd say friendly.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So the second question is, what are you doing at every visit to try to make sure they feel that way? This is where you start to get into the high reliability stuff. And I won't ask you, but most clinicians have never thought about that. And then when they start thinking, okay, well, every single visit, I'm going to make sure I smile. I'm going to make sure I'm physically at the level they are. I'm going to bring up something that I remember from the last time. And the example I give, which cracks people up, but this was a real example, is like with one of my patients. One day I found myself saying at the visit, how's little Billy's drug rehab going? But that's kind of thing. Then the third question is, what are the barriers that make it hard for you to give that message to patients each time? Again, this is part of high reliability. How do you anticipate failures and prevent them? And then the fourth one is, does everyone on the team know this is what's important to you? And so like those 4 questions are actually useful for teams as well. And it would be useful for everyone to know that you want to be seen as friendly. This is the kind of thing that this leads to, is without trying to be manipulative to patients. Patients like it when other people in the team indicate they know the other people that they're being sent to. And if they indicate they really know them, like if you were at the Brigham and I said, I'm going to send you to Kevin Hamilton. Uh, he is such a friendly guy. Just the fact that saying anything, you could say, or I'm going to send you, to, Chris, he actually grew up in Austin, not far from you, or something like that. Anything like that, patients fall in love with that stuff when they see that we know each other. And then the fact is, it makes us feel better too. So I think that those to have great teams and to have your individuals and groups sort of thinking through what do I want my brand to be, and then how do I live up to it. That's the kind of thing that reduces burnout.
What do you
Anyway, I'm giving you long answers to every question because I figure, okay, I might as well give you the sort of shticks I've worked out over the years. So I hope it's not too much.
what are the words that you think of or you want your organization to know about you?
Well, all right. So like my joking answer when people have asked me that is, well, I think I'd start by, I hope they're saying he looks fit, but that wouldn't be in my top 3. But it would probably be in my top 10. But no, I want them not a whole lot different from what Kevin said. I think virtually everyone says they want to be seen by their patients as, compassionate, empathetic, and you want patients to think of you as really capable, knowledgeable, and so on. And then, I want the patients to feel like they can really trust me. I'm trustworthy. Trust is a big deal issue these days. And when trust is a topic, I'll say a little bit about trust because it's trust is something we all kind of take for granted, and we tend to think if we're good people and we're working really hard, people should trust us. But in times of turmoil like we're living through now, that's when then trust really starts to become important. And people, so there's been a lot more thinking about trust and like how do you actually try to make it operational. So one of the concepts of trust, which I found useful, is that is confidence you're going to be treated fairly in circumstances you haven't even thought of yet. So like, people should know that, UT San Antonio, that even if COVID is running wild and no one can come out of the house and everything's got to be, it can be anything done face to face. These folks are going to, care about you, and they're going to try to help you, even if you've got terrible back pain and no one is doing face-to-face physical therapy. We're going to figure out a way to do what we can for you. So and caregivers should feel like UT San Antonio is going to protect me. They're not going to put me in situations where I'm going to be exposed to risk, and and they get it that like I've got bills to pay and loans to pay and that kind of thing, and they're not gonna just sort of X out a line in the budget and completely toss my life into chaos. At least they're aware of the situation. So, all right. So, how do you build trust? There was this nice little article a year ago, like last May, in Harvard Business Review by this, woman named Frances Frei, Frei. She's a great person. She actually went to Uber for 2 years when Uber was having, their big sort of meltdown, with all sexual harassment and everything like that at the top, and so on, and everyone nearly, got in a lot of trouble. So she went there to try to change the culture. And so Francis's model for building trust is basically three elements. There's empathy, authenticity, and logic. And you need to, and I, the fact that you guys are logging on and doing this on a Saturday morning when you don't have to suggests to me that a bunch of you guys are going to end up being in leadership roles, management leadership roles. And so this will be useful for you. So empathy, authenticity, and logic. Okay, empathy, means like you got to show them that, you get what they're going through, and that you know that they're in pain, they're scared, that they don't feel respected, they're worried about the finances, that kind of thing. Showing that you get it. That's one. Authenticity means showing people that you're for real, you're credible, you're not a hypocrite. And if you say you feel it, it's not like you're going to turn the corner and you're going to forget about it. You're authentic. And then the third component is logic, where you have to show, and you're effective. You're organized. You follow up on things. You don't just like be in the moment and be in the room and sympathize, that kind of thing. But then you can get stuff done. And so those three elements are very important to show patients that they can trust you, and if you're in a management role, to show your colleagues that they can trust you.
Zach had a question earlier on in the chat. Dr. Lee, was your team at the Brigham already of that mindset and had that collaborative approach, or did you have to cultivate that? Is the team approach in the way you describe it really the norm, or is it harder to come by?
It's not the norm. And I think it's not that hard to build. You got to value it. And I can tell you, I practice in a clinic that was created in the 70s for people without insurance in Boston. And now it's got a mix of poor people, but then there are plenty of people figure out the care is good, and they're United States senators and CEOs, and the mayor comes to our practice. So we give good care. And so we have a real mix, but people, it's a clinic, it's sort of a chaotic clinic. And there's so many uninsured now there aren't very many uninsured people in Massachusetts. I mean, you have quite a few in Texas, but in Massachusetts, because of healthcare reform, we've got very few uninsured people now. But we have a lot of Medicaid patients where we lose money on them, and so it's a money losing operation for the Brigham. So we don't get things like fancy. No one has changed the artwork or repaint. It's got peeling paint and that kind of stuff. And our personnel are virtually all from the community, but it's sort of fun and warm. Like most of the people, the secretary works with me, and the medical assistant, they're both from the Dominican Republic, and so on. But they're really warm. You hear them saying to patients, they call their patients darling and that kind of thing. And it's a great place. I love practicing there. But I have to say that we have some people coming and going and of working with us that I figured out I didn't know the name of my medical assistant, because she always had her badge flipped over, and when it was flipped, I could see it. It was a name that I didn't recognize as a name, and I'm sure many of you have been in that situation where you don't even know the name. Actually, I tried to send a patient to one person I had a patient with atrial with a supraventricular tachyarrhythmia that I couldn't handle. So I tried to send him to an arrhythmia specialist who was a good friend. He was booked for like 9 months. So I said, "Who can see this patient for me in the group?" And they said, "Usha Tedrow has an appointment." I said, let me grab that appointment." So the patient goes to Usha Tedrow, comes back, and was telling me how very good care, things were great. And I realized I didn't know Usha Tedrow's gender. I didn't know whether, male or female. Uh, she is a woman. She's a terrific woman. But like, I just didn't know. And I was trying to uh, feel my way. I was trying to get the patient to give me a clue, but the patient wasn't giving it up. I'm sure the patient knew what I was doing. It crossed my mind. I wanted to go, "So what was Dr. Tedrow wearing when Dr. Tedrow saw you?" That kind of thing. But that happens all the time now. Um, so we felt like we've got to actually look like a team. So we started to have team meetings, and we did the sort of corny stuff where people would say a little bit about themselves, about their family. And I finally learned that my medical assistant's name was Delmira, and that she had one kid. She's a single mother, and she had had breast cancer last year, and all these things which I was just oblivious to. But then after that, you know, just things like that made a real difference. I had this one moment where I heard and it was kind of like, Kevin, she kind of heard that I wanted to be thought of as friendly to patients. And I heard her walking by with the patients. She checked them in and took their weight and all that kind of stuff. And I heard her say, "Oh, you have Dr. Lee. You are so lucky." And I just sort of sat up taller in my chair. And then when the patient came in, I just turned to the patient. I said, first thing I said was, "Isn't Delmira great?" And and I was, I mean, Delmira is great, but like you can just imagine how that makes the patient feel. I mean, of course, it makes Delmira and I feel, nice. But this kind of stuff, which is soft, it is part of what makes life bearable. Bearable, so I think that corny though that stuff might be, the working on creating a good team environment, uh, it's one of the most valuable things that one can do.
Jordan had a question, kind of a two-parter. Dr. Lee, is there a fine line of trying to accomplish these characteristics that patients want and love, and the idea of quote unquote professionalism that seems to be so instilled in us during and after school? Almost
Yeah.
as if we need to put on a professional mask that may impede some of these traits that our patient may want to see in us.
You know, I certainly know there are times where I feel like there's tension, and and you know, and I just sort of feel like, if your intentions are good, you'll work it out. And I don't think there's a one size fits all in terms of the way you interact with patients and so on. There are people who want to be treated like your buddies. There are, but there are a lot of people who, um, as one psychiatrist said to me, they don't want to be treated by someone who might be sitting next to them in the bar that evening. They want to feel like you've got some special knowledge, and that, you know, there is a bit of magical stuff to healthcare. They're hoping that you're going to heal them. And so they do want to uh, try to, you do want to preserve the belief that, you've got some special expertise and so on. Um, like I don't, I always I always start by using their surnames. I never go right to first names. But if they want me to call them by their first name, I always do, and I always say, okay, I will. But the deal is, you got to call me Tom then, because I do want it to be equal. I've got my little jokes about, most of my patients call me Dr. Lee, and I don't stop them from doing that. Uh, but and I actually recently had my first grandchild, and people were saying to me, "Oh, what's your grandson going to call you?" And I said, "Well, Dr. Lee, or what else?" And but uh, let me just see if, oh, I think my wife's still here taking care of that. Okay, great, great, great. All right, that was the FedEx thing, Chris. I said I might have to run down the answer. Um, but I've got my little jokes worked out. Like I one thing I say is that when people say, like Chris asked me from whether I wanted to call Dr. Lee, the joke I would ordinarily use is that I said, but the Brigham, when people call me Dr. Lee, they're usually being sarcastic. It is nice to show people that you've got humility, even if it's rehearsed and not completely spontaneous. But at the same time, you do want to preserve the reason to have the professionalism thing is you want the patients to feel like you've got some special expertise and powers uh, that and the fact is you do. You've got experience, and you guys don't have tremendous experience yet, but I can tell you, like, my wife went yesterday morning at 6:15 to a excellent physical therapist because of she's got torn cartilage in one of her knees, and the question is, should she have surgery or not? And she's going to have 6 weeks of PT, and the surgeon and the physical therapist she was sitting Indian style with her cross legs, sitting on the table while she filled out the form, and the physical therapist goes, if you can sit like that, you don't need you don't need surgery. And just hearing that from an experienced person, made all the difference. And it's going to make her work harder at her physical therapy, in the weeks ahead. So I basically think there's no one way to be, and be yourself, have fun with people. I mean, you spend too much time doing patient care to do it for decades if you're not going to have fun. I really do have fun in my interaction with patients, but there's it is it's complicated, but it's interesting, and it's like dancing with someone.
To that point, Ben Lee just asked, how do you gauge whether a new patient expects a more personal or more professional experience?
Well, I always want to open the door for, so I do internal medicine, and even though I train in cardiology, my clinical practice is primary care, and so I do think you want to open the door wide and let them talk about what they want to talk about. But even though your time frame, is often very compressed, but I virtually always, one of the things I learned from imitating someone who I think is a really good clinician, and I think this would work very well for you guys in your work, is the first question I always ask is, tell me what your life is like. And they're usually like surprised by that question, but I go, I say, like, and they go, what do you mean? I say, like, tell me, what a typical day is like. And what do you do? And they go, well, I walk my dog in the Blue Hills, and that kind of thing. And you get information about their functional status and so on, but you've also shown interest in them, and it's not like you're immediately jumping to, can you walk up 2 flights of stairs without stopping or something like that. I also do what I did with you, Chris, when we first both logged on to Zoom, which is I even before I say, tell me what your life is like, I go, tell me, tell me the Chris Hugan story. And then they will go, well, I was diagnosed in 1997 with pancreatic cancer. And I go, no, don't start with the medical stuff. Tell me, like, where are you from? What was your family? Tell me about a little bit about the family you came from and stuff. I said, this kind of stuff is, it might be relevant, but like it's interesting. And when I do that, but then, like, you have to be confident in your ability to manage conversation so you can get to the clinical stuff, in an appropriate amount of time. But opening the door wide by asking them to tell them about yourself, and then say, what's your life like? I do think that whether you're internal medicine or primary care or physical therapy, I think those are nice ways to open up any interaction as a default strategy anyway.
That's awesome. That is what I wish more of our professors would talk about, because especially in like our orthopedic class, it's a rush to the kind of objective exam, and it's so there's never really a focus on asking the person about the person,
Yeah.
which I think is extremely valuable. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are really touching people, and a lot of people, I mean, just jumping right to that is something that I would imagine sometimes is unnerving for patients.
I had a question about, like, if one of the biggest goals in of what you're trying to achieve is the reduction of suffering, where do you draw the line between, like, we want to try to reduce suffering at all costs versus we want to do things that we know have support behind them, or like there's that fine line between maybe experimental treatments or things that are not supported, but maybe it could reduce suffering? Kind of, do you have a line in the sand where you draw with that?
And I think the answer is no. I think that, like, you want patients to feel like you're gonna do all you can to help them, but exposing them to risk from doing things which are, trying things which aren't, for which there's no evidence and so on, trying hydroxychloroquine for, to prevent COVID or something like that. I mean, I am, I think I don't have a problem like lapsing, into being a paternalistic. I would just say to patients, you don't want to do that, and that's in the same kind of thing, like, about that's bullshit. It. Like, there are times where, like, you can do the short answer thing. You don't want to do that, but when they there are others who need a longer sort of discussion. I mean, I do what I think's best for patients in the long runs, and sometimes it's not consistent with guidelines, because guidelines are not the right for every single patient. No guideline's perfect for every patient, but I do my best to take care of patients, and I do my best to be efficient with them as well. I never want patients to feel like I'm pinching pennies and they might be hurt by it. But I do think it's appropriate to say to patients where, like, this is really, this is a waste of, this is a waste. This is a waste. And
Hannah asked, how do you balance gaining that connection and also obtaining a good objective exam within the time constraints that you have?
Well, I would say that there are times where I have to ask people to come back for another appointment to like really do the finish things. But the reality is, I don't want to cut people short, in the inner, for the talk part. And there are times that I run late because of that. Or occasionally, when I just can't bear to be any later, I'll say to folks, okay, it was very important that we had this dialogue. I'm gonna have to book you to come back so we can continue, such and such. But I don't think that you can, I think it's not good care to like make people feel rushed. At the end of the day, uh, you know, we're in the we're trying to give people peace of mind. We can't always get rid of their pain, but we can give them peace of mind that that we've done it, we've tried everything. And again, this is part of the trust thing. The goal, if the goal is peace of mind, then if we don't do the interactive part, we know we're not going to achieve peace of mind. It's, the goal has got to be more than we're going to cover our butts so we can't be sued for malpractice. And you know, peace of mind is probably the final product in healthcare. Because I mean, we're all going to die. We're all going to, go downhill before we die. But we all want peace of mind, as that happens.
Does anyone else have any questions or talking points? I know, Zach, you just finished Tom's book. Has anyone else read The Good Doctor?
Oh, well, I'm tickled that you have. It was fun writing those stories.
Yeah, if you don't, I mean, so I just finished reading it. It was awesome. So thank you first off for taking the time to do that. It was interesting hearing you say this now, where I think at the end you're talking about how a lot of these qualities are pretty inherent in a lot of medical professionals, but really these individual clinicians that you highlighted are almost like they've gone even more above and beyond. And while it might seem like, oh man, taking that on would burn me out more, it's almost like finding that desire to work towards something collectively with a team that's bigger than any one person, by yourself. Like that's almost seems like the secret sauce to a really like fulfilling and enriching career, even though, yeah, there's days and there's times where you're like, oh my God, like what, like you're feeling it, but the end result. And so, yeah, those were definitely some really inspiring stories, and the collective, consistent traits was super helpful to kind of see at the end of that.
Oh, thanks so much. I mean, they are fabulous people, and I mean, their life isn't perfect. They've got bumps, and they have their periods. I stay in touch with them, and one of them is down in the dumps right now, and so on. But Zach, you're completely right. Is that what I like is that when they sort of went with their instincts, the things that like piss them off and stuff, they would, they would took on. But it was, I always crack up in life when like A logically leads to B logically leads to C logically leads to D, and then suddenly you find yourself doing something completely nuts that makes no sense, but every single step made sense along the way. And that's what happened with these folks. They like the craniofacial surgeon who finds herself running a camp for kids with cleft palate that she had started, and so on. Like it made no sense, but every little step made perfect sense, and then it took her to something that was actually very, very rewarding. So I would say go with your best instincts. When something makes you feel happy and proud, that's good, and go with that. And it can take you to some places that are remarkable. And then organizations should make people feel supported in doing that kind of thing. So it was really fun writing that, and like I've gotten lots of more people who've read it say, oh, there's so and so from my organization, you got to meet this person. So I was just getting emails last week from someone saying I got to do another volume and so on, and I can't do that, but give them competing things. But I'm so glad that you guys liked it.
Yeah. What do you, since you have take on so many things from writing books to seeing patients to teaching, what do you find is like the most inherent value or the thing you enjoy the most on a weekly basis?
Well, I think that All right, so I would say, I am a generation older than all you guys. You guys are the age of my daughters. I've got 3 girls, and I would say that there is nothing as important as making your children proud. So I've got uh, and my daughter's lives are going to be different. You know, one's in medicine, but medicine's different than when I was going through my career. My youngest daughter is doing podcasts. I mean, clearly people are learning differently today and taking information differently than they did in my era. And it's really fun to, uh, you know, have values that you're trying to pursue, but then seeing how they can get pursued in different ways. I mean, that's one of the reasons why interacting with you guys who are like, you're in a different part of healthcare and you're a different generation from me. It's going to be really interesting for me to see what you do. I mean, I'm tickled to death that you wanted to talk about this stuff, on a Saturday morning. But um, I'm interested in hearing what happens with you guys. And so on any of you guys, like, my email, which Chris knows, it's just very simple, thomas.lee@pressganey.com. And any of you can email me and with questions, but like, frankly, if I'm curious to see what people do with good intentions to make care better for patients. And so seeing what will be durable, that's a sort of, all of us want to do things we're proud of, that our kids admire, and then seeing that there'll be longer term effects. I mean, I think the risk for you guys and the risk for other people in clinical medicine is you get depressed because you feel like, oh, it's just one patient at a time, and it's everyone is like a pebble falling in the pond, and the ripples, you know, and you feel like, what's the point? Instead, I'm hoping you'll feel like, there's a big point. You're reducing the suffering of people who are in a lot of pain, physically and psychologically, and taking that on, and that's like a noble thing to do. I hope I have a cousin, Angela Duckworth, who writes about grit, and Angela and I have written some stuff about that, organizational grit. We wrote a piece in Harvard Business Review together. I'm hoping you guys will be gritty, and try to make care better, try and keep on plugging away. I don't know if any of you've read Angela's stuff or seen her TED Talk, but applying that sort of frame of mind and helping people who are doing that, that's actually really rewarding.
So Zach and Steph, do y'all want to talk about what y'all do for Level Up? But you should talk about how her TED Talk's in the curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, TED Talk's awesome.
And like,
Angela. Yeah. Angela's. Okay. All right, great.
I mean, yours would be too if you did one, I'm sure.
Well, your paper, actually, Zero Pain is Not the Goal, is also in one of our lectures from one of our mentors. But it's really thanks to people like yourself who have laid all of this out for us, because it has enabled us to leverage technology and sort of band together and kind of create a coalition and community of clinicians, new grads, older grads, people in academia, students, all coming together, really trying to create change at the academic level, trying to drive a little bit more reform, and starting to cultivate newer grads that are going to be coming out with this balance of empathy and high technical skills, and people that are all just super passionate about pushing things forward and making an impact on healthcare. So,
well, and teams like yours that you mentioned make that the norm.
Yeah.
Instead of it being not like things that people have to work to cultivate, even if it is on the easier side to do, and have it not necessarily be diamonds in the rough for people to come across a team or a doctor or some other clinician.
Well, I would encourage you guys to think about this, which is, I appreciate all your nice words. I started, and what maybe my most durable contribution is, like, I started this thing, NEJM Catalyst, which is our online spinoff from the New England Journal on healthcare delivery for trying to improve value. And if you guys do things which are improving care and or making it more efficient, write about it some and share it with the world. I mean, it's fun to get credit for stuff. It's part of the satisfaction. And so think about sharing, how you're going to share it with the world. Writing's not the only way, but it's a good way. And you can always email me, and I can help you refine it in a way that's, writable. But like I have a perspective piece that's coming out in the New England Journal sometime in the next few weeks. Just based upon like a few weeks, a month ago, I had a Zoom family meeting. I had a patient in the hospital who was my primary care patient in the hospital with heart failure, ejection fraction 15%, renal failures, creatinine crept up to 5.5, massive edema, and we had made him DNR. He's in his 70s, but then we kind of stabilized him out. His heart failure was probably due to tachyarrhythmia, and he started heading in the right direction. We thought he was going to die when he came in, and he stabilized out. And then we thought, okay, we don't really need him in the hospital, but where should he go next? Rehab or what? Could he go home? And we had a Zoom family meeting, and it was a course suggested not by a doctor, but by the nurse practitioner. And it was scheduled for 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And the nurse practitioner said, these work better if for the first 15 minutes on Zoom, the clinicians talk together. So, and then we let the family into the room. And so it was the first time that everyone in the care team interacted directly with each other. We were all writing notes, we were all reading notes, and in the article I write, we had all been doing a good job as individuals, but we hadn't done a great job as a group until that moment. And like we said, okay, where can the patient go? And the inpatient nephrologist goes, the patient can't go home. This patient's creatinine is 5.5. Someone has to be asking him every day, check on him to make sure he's not developing uremia. And I said, I'll do that. I'll take care of that. Between me and my office, we'll touch base with him every day. And then so the inpatient nephrologist goes, well, if you'll do that, then as far as I'm concerned, he can go home. And so we problem solved. And the hysterical thing was that at 4:25, we were supposed to let the family in the room at 4:15. At 4:25, the nurse practitioner goes, the family's waiting, and all of us who had kept patients waiting an hour, in real life in the office, we all sort of go, oh my God, when people are waiting on Zoom, it's somehow so much worse. And so we let that family in the room, and they're the brothers in California and so on, and everyone had the same. We were all on the same page. We had gotten our act together, and we said, we talked about it. He can go home. We're going to do this. Dr. Lee in his office will be checking, but like, you should be texting him every day. Let him know such and such. And the family all felt like it was great, that, they really appreciated it. And so then it was a remarkable good thing, and which didn't happen at all before COVID. And I'm sure it's family meetings like this are happening at UT San Antonio. But you participate in something which is good, and then you go, okay, why was this good? And like for me, like I just went home that night and I wrote a draft of perspective piece. New England Journal said, we really like this, and they're going to print it. So when you're part of something that actually it's good, think of, okay, what made this good? What made this special? And then share it with the world. And you get credit for it. So anyway, so that was just based on one family, one interaction in patient care, and I got a New England Journal article out of it. So But it's recognizing when there's good stuff happening to you and then going with it.
All right, before we wrap up, does anyone have any final questions?
Okay, well, look, I think it's very nice that you guys give your time on Saturday mornings and the interest you showed and stuff, which is softer stuff, but I think that it's I'm not really a squishy gooey guy. I mean, I am about getting stuff done, and I do think it's valuable to be effective in medicine, and part of being effective is being able to sustain it over decades in your career. That's part of what Angela's, my cousin's, obsessed with, is what will sustain people over decades. And I think that healthcare is a great thing to do. You know, you guys are going to help reduce the suffering for a whole lot of people. There'll be a whole bunch of people who feel like I still got more suffering, but you've got to help them have peace of mind about it. And I think you can do it. All right. Well, though, this is great. You all got my email, and I'm
Yes.
happy to be of any help to you if I can.
Thank you so much
Okay.
for taking your time out of your Saturday. I know your wife and you are going to cook. Is that right?
I am going to go right downstairs. So I'm going to eat first and then cook second. So,
Solid. All right.
See
Well,
you
thank you
guys.
so much.
Bye now.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.